Welcome to One-on-One Nightly. Good evening, everyone. A production of WFUV Sports, live on Twitter and YouTube this evening from a new time, 9:30 until 11. Staying up a little bit later with you guys this evening. I'm here alongside Dylan Balsamo, Jack Roach with the headlines, and our producer, of course, Alex Woles. My name is Sam Davis. Thank you for tuning in to One-on-One Nightly. We got a lot to get into tonight, Dylan. We have the NFL and the Super Bowl coming up. In case you didn't realize, I think everyone would realize that. But in case you didn't, we got the Super Bowl. We'll be talking about it. MLB, of course, big negotiations with the Players Association. The NHL has some COVID-19 issues. And the start of the NBA season, we've got buy or sell to end out the show. But before we get into all that, I want to start with you, Dylan. How you doing tonight?
I'm good. Thank you for letting me know the Super Bowl was this weekend. I don't think I would have realized.
Yes.
You know what? I want to talk about something. One of my favorite things about Super Bowl season is all the commercials that aren't legally allowed to say the word Super Bowl and have to say the big game. I think it's the funniest thing in all of television, and I thought I'd share that because I'm sure someone out there feels the same way. So.
Yeah, because who calls it the big game? I mean, it's the Super Bowl. It's Super Bowl Sunday, but it's like, whatever.
That it sounds like something, for obvious reasons, it sounds like something out of a sitcom, like being in high school or something. Be like, hey, you ready for the big game, man? Like that's exactly what it sounds like.
Well, we're going to jump into it here and get started. As much as I love talking with you, Dylan, let's talk some sports here. Earlier this week, of course, the Rams sent Jared Goff first-round draft picks in 2022 and 2023. And a third-round draft pick in 2021 to the Lions, all for Matthew Stafford. So Matthew Stafford, he spent 12 seasons with the Lions, going to the playoffs only 3 times. Obviously, that has something to do with the Lions and not as much to do with Matthew Stafford. He gets his chance. He's going to be playing with a much better team, the LA Rams, whose defense carried them to a playoff victory and a divisional round matchup against the Packers. Meanwhile, Jared Goff, on the other side of things, looks to definitely rebound. He had a very tough year. He's had a tough couple years. The Rams kind of gave up on him there. The Lions get him, and they also get some big draft picks, which will help them in the future. So I want to start here. I want to start with the Lions from their perspective and their side of it, Dylan. How do you think about this trade from their position?
Well, the Lions have certainly, no matter where they were going to trade Matthew Stafford, and there were a whole bunch of candidates for who that team was going to be. But they had a very high price for him, and I don't think they're to blame for that. Matthew Stafford is a wonderful quarterback. We've all known that for a long time. In fact, you saying 12 seasons he spent with the Lions, I can't believe that. But this was a great turnout of a trade for them. A lot of great draft picks, which are always, draft picks perhaps matter more in the NFL than they do in any other sport. So that's great for them. And also, Jared Goff leaving the Rams and coming to Detroit. I think it's worth noting Jared Goff is, I don't think by any means, a bad quarterback. Did not have the best of seasons in LA this year. It just didn't work out with him and Sean McVay's Rams. It just didn't work. And that's fine. People work in different places. So, you hope for the Lions' sake, Goff is able to find his place in Detroit. And you know what? He might just.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you because it's almost like Jared Goff is the big thing in this trade, but there's also those draft picks, which I think are huge to think about, especially with the Lions, who are on basically total rebuild. I mean, they have a new GM, they have a new head coach, they have a new offensive coordinator, so they're full rebuild here, and accumulating draft picks and getting those picks, especially in the first round, is huge for a franchise that obviously is just about at the bottom and has a lot of work to go. And they don't just need a quarterback. They don't just need a guy to build around. They need players at every position, to be honest. So maybe Jared Goff isn't that guy to really build your franchise around, because obviously he's struggled the last couple of years. But at the very worst, he can be just kind of like a bridge quarterback to get you to maybe a quarterback that you can get in free agency down the road, or maybe someone you can draft. I'm not sure what they'll do there, but that's the big thing with Jared Goff. I think he has upside, but at the very least, he's kind of that bridge quarterback that a lot of rebuilding teams, I think, need. And you can't just take a quarterback and be like, okay, the Lions are good to go. It's the whole team effort. It's a huge rebuild for them. So I think overall, I do like this move for them because not only do you get Jared Goff, you get that upside, but the bigger deal is that you get all those draft picks, and those are going to help for your future.
Like you said, he can certainly be seen as, I think the best word to describe it is as a placeholder quarterback. And you could argue that's kind of what he was in LA too, or at least that's how the Rams have now constructed the trajectory of their franchise, getting Stafford in return for Goff here. But, like we've been talking about, that's a lot of draft picks here for Detroit. And so now they have a few options. A lot of people will kind of assume that, now Jared Goff will be the quarterback who starts for the Lions come the beginning of the 2021 season. But that also doesn't have to be the case. There's still a lot of offseason left. There's still a lot of time for, perhaps trade him over somewhere else, get more draft picks. And, even if you do stick with Jared Goff, we've talked a lot in the sports world about the quarterback class in this coming NFL draft. But I think it's just overall a very good draft class. So this is a great move for the Lions. They got everything they needed to, I think, get the dominoes in order to start moving things along for a franchise that has been in the dumps for, honestly, it seems like a really long time.
Yeah, and you just said it, being in the dumps and certainly not being a very good organization for a while. And that is why I feel so happy for Matthew Stafford, for him to get out of that organization. And looking at the Rams side of it here and their standpoint, we talked about the draft picks, and it's a little bit of a risk always, I think, giving away some of your future. We talked a lot when the Harden trade broke about all the picks that they gave away, obviously way more than this, but still, whenever you're giving away first round draft picks, I think they mean a little something. And there's certainly going to be a risk around that, especially when, I hate to bring this up with Matthew Stafford, but he's not won a playoff game. And the Rams are in a win now situation, with their defense. It's best in the NFL. They're ready. They've already went to the playoffs with Jared Goff. Matthew Stafford's a better quarterback. You'd think for them, it's really a championship is a reasonable expectation for them, if not now, at least a couple of years down the road. So having a quarterback that has never played in a playoff game before and being in that win now situation, trading away those picks, it's a little risky. I'm not going to say it's a huge risk because I think Matthew Stafford is a very good quarterback. I mean, there's no doubting that. He's thrown for over 4,000 yards in 2020. He had 9 seasons of 20-plus touchdowns, throwing to receivers that, from the Lions standpoint, quite frankly, aren't very good. So the fact that you can't overlook that. You can't overlook the fact that Matthew Stafford is a very good quarterback. He's also going to have a very good offensive line, especially against the pass, and he's also going to have some really good wide receivers to throw to. He's got Cooper Kupp, he's got Robert Woods, among others. A very good wide receiving group. I think that'll help him as well. So there's no doubting that, but I do have to bring that up, and I do have to bring out the playoff experience because it is a little bit of a risk, at least.
There actually are a lot of parallels that we can see in the last month for what the Brooklyn Nets did in getting their hands on James Harden and what the Rams have done this week in getting their hands on Matthew Stafford, because both were good teams in line to be competitive for at least 5 years, I would say, for either franchise. But what they've both did is really brought that window down to a much smaller amount. And I would argue, perhaps the Rams even more so than the Nets, were like, this is the year, you got to do it this year. They have showed the NFL their whole hand. And whether or not that's a good enough hand to win, we're going to find out. But the Rams have thrown all their chips in, to cross poker analogies.
Yeah, I mean, that's the bottom line with this trade. That's the bottom line with the Nets trade a couple months ago, or a month or so ago, is we're going to just have to wait and see. We're not so sure what we're going to get with this team. We're not sure what we're going to get with Matthew Stafford come playoff time. We know he's a very good quarterback, and I fully expect him to play really well with a better team around him. This Rams team is exciting. If I'm a Rams fan and if I'm Sean McVay, I'm super excited for this team going into next season. But like you said, I think to understand the full effect of this trade, we won't be able to do that until maybe looking a couple seasons down the road, where we can look back and say, okay, did the Rams, play well in the playoffs and make this trade worth it? I'm not so sure if we can exactly do that right away. We'll see down the road. As we transition here a little bit, we approach Super Bowl Sunday. Obviously, it's important for us to look back on the 2020-2021 NFL season in the midst of a pandemic. The NFL was very proud to say that no games got canceled, keyword, during the 2020 season. But that is, of course, as you know, Dylan, only a small part of the story. 18 games were postponed from weeks 4 to 13. We had teams playing games with no quarterbacks. We had teams playing games on Tuesday and Wednesday. We had teams playing with no head coach in the playoffs. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. So, Dylan, I just want to bring this up to you. Obviously, no games canceled, but certainly a lot postponed. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think Roger Goodell might have a lot of red marks on his back from patting himself on the back too much. But that aside, the NFL is taking a lot of credit for getting to their whole season. And, something that we specifically here at FUV have been saying since right before the NFL season started was, look, no matter whether they should or they should not, the NFL's happen. If they have to play on Easter, they will play on Easter. But, the NFL acting like they were able to trek through an entire season through all of this stuff they've willed through just to get to a Super Bowl. It feels like, let's say you were running a marathon, right? And halfway through the marathon, you break your leg and you're down on the ground because you broke your leg. But somehow you're able to use your one unbroken leg to hop your way to the finish line. And then afterwards you were like, hooray, I made it through the marathon. Aren't you so proud of me? I made it through the marathon. And I'm like, yeah, I guess, but you should have gone to the hospital after you broke your leg. Like,
yeah, you
to
should
me, that's
have
how this feels.
Not only going to the hospital, but at least, I don't know, maybe putting some bandages on it or something, or at least trying to do what you can instead of saying in this situation, saying, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm fine. I can finish the marathon. And that's certainly what Roger Goodell seemed to have done. Not only did he say, okay, we don't really need to do anything. We're fine. We'll be okay. We'll get the season done. And he was right. They did get the season done, but at what cost here? I mean, certainly the word that comes to mind for me is just determination, I guess, from the NFL standpoint. Whether that be a good thing or a bad thing, I guess determination is the best way to put it, because going into this year, like you said, Dylan, initially I thought, at least, the NFL was going to have maybe the toughest time pulling this thing off with COVID because of just the sheer number of athletes. Obviously, it's a very physical sport, a contact sport. It's hard to avoid a lot of things that COVID brings on. But early into the year, you're totally right. Everyone's thinking there's no way they're not going to do this. And that was just the attitude that they had. And whether that be a good thing or a bad thing, I lean more towards a bad thing, because you could have handled this better. You could have done things that we see in other leagues being done. You look at the NBA, they're really trying hard, I think, to adjust protocols. Whether that's successful or not at least just trying to adjust the protocols and make things a little bit easier on these players, make things a little bit more seamless and more normal, I guess you could say, is what the NBA is doing. The NFL didn't really even try to do that. They just kind of plowed through the season. They were determined to finish the season, and it's kind of a miracle, but they did. And here we are in the Super Bowl, about to have a full season complete. But I would say miracle is a good word to describe how the season went.
Miracle is one way of saying it. To be honest, and I've been very tough on the NFL this year, and I will continue to be. But the way they are celebrating this, to be honest, to me, it just seems very insensitive. Like of all the things that have gone wrong in the last year, and all the people who have actually willed themselves through this and been determined enough to get through this, whether it be fighting the actual virus themselves or losing their job or losing loved ones or any of those types of things, just for the NFL to celebrate the fact that the 49ers got to go to East Rutherford to play both the Giants and Jets this year. Like, woohoo! Like it doesn't add up to me. It is focusing on the wrong things. Sports are the reward of a functioning society, and when society stops functioning, why are we pretending that it is?
I mean, you're opening here an entire conversation we could have just about sports in general being played right now. I mean, it's not just the NFL, and I also am hard on the NFL. I think they could have certainly done things a little bit better and could have cleaned up protocols and could have at least maybe worked on changing the schedule around, because I know we've seen other leagues do that too. But even those things, to your point, Dylan, don't always work. Like, we look at the NHL, they decided to change their divisions around and to limit travel and do all those things. The NFL did not do that. That was something they could have done. But even in the NHL, we see COVID outbreaks and we see issues that just keeps happening. Unfortunately, it's just a world issue. So I think going off what you're saying here, Dylan, I think it's just a bigger situation of just the NFL football. It's a situation of sports in general being played right now, especially when we're so close to a vaccine. And I think of baseball too, how their Players Association, we're going to get into that, but is so determined on playing now instead of waiting a little while to help their safety and to improve all that. So it's a little frustrating seeing that and seeing the lack of precautions. I think that not only the NFL is taking, but almost everyone is taking in sports in general. And I want to bring in here, I know he has a point, Jack Roach. We're going to bring in our third host here. Jack, what do you have to say about this? You're going to disagree with Dylan a little bit, I think.
I just want to push back a tiny bit. And I definitely agree with what you're saying, Dylan, that sports are a result of a functioning society, but we're at a point where there's going to be sports, right? Whether you like it or not. And I think you have to look at what the MLB and the NBA has done, and I think it's really hard to say that the NFL has done that much of a worse job than either one of those leagues, especially with the NBA really having to pivot and reevaluate their protocols. And in the NFL, you've got teams with originally 53-man rosters, now expanded. And, you expect to see COVID cases spreading like wildfire when one person gets in the locker room. And don't get me wrong, there were outbreaks, but I'm definitely pleasantly surprised with how the NFL season went and them actually playing 16 games, whereas in the NBA, I would be shocked if they played every game this season.
And Jack, I don't completely disagree with what you're saying, because I think the only league that handled this really, really well was the NHL. I thought they did the best possible job they could have, especially when they got into the bubble. What most disappoints me about the NFL is that they were the only one of the three leagues that was not really in operation when lockdown started, when COVID hit, when this truly became something we had to all deal with as a nation and as a human society. I'm disappointed in the fact that they had all that time to prepare and adjust their schedule, and the 49ers still had to play 2 games in East Rutherford. like it was like they were so concerned with staying on their corporate schedule to make sure the Super Bowl happens when the Super Bowl is supposed to happen, that they forgot to tend to those things that end up really mattering. So that's really, more than anything, I'm just very disappointed in the NFL and how they've handled this, and the fact that they have such pride in the final result that I don't really think is that good.
But do you think them taking a private jet across the country is really spreading? You know what I mean? Like,
I get what you're saying, but I think just to do that in the first place, private jet or not, is just like to me that's a big slap in the face to frontline healthcare worker, to everybody who has been in the grunt of this. Like, why are we even pretending this is a regular NFL season? That's mostly what I'm saying.
To combine, I'm going to try and be the mediator here. I'm going to try and combine your 2 points. I think the success of the NFL, I think, is somewhat impressive just because of the lack of what they did. They really didn't do much, like you said, Dylan. They had all that time and they didn't do that much, but they still found success, and they had a season. I mean, they did what they could. They were determined. I'm not sure if it's totally impressive, and I would be a lot more pleased with the NFL if they did things a little bit differently. But at the end of the day, we got a season, and I guess that's something to look forward to as we head into Super Bowl Sunday here. Looking back in the NFL season, speaking of all this, the NFL Players Association said today there is no scenario due to COVID-19 where the Super Bowl will be moved. So that is good news. We're excited for that game on Sunday. We're going to preview that game next after a quick break. Stay tuned to One on One Nightly. Welcome back to One on One Nightly, live on YouTube and Twitter. I'm Sam Davis, alongside Dylan Balsamo, Jack Roach joining us here, Alex Waltz doing the production as always. We are here for the big game. As we said, Super Bowl Sunday, the Bucs and Chiefs getting underway at 6:30. Incredible matchups in this game. I mean, you could go down the list. You got young and old between Brady and Mahomes. You have the high-flying Chiefs offense versus an impressive younger Bucs defense. You have two great coaches, Andy Reid and Bruce Arians. It's just a lot. There's a lot of storylines here. So I'm going to start with you, Dylan. What is the storyline that you're most excited about heading into this game?
Well, Sunday is going to feel like the culmination of a question that the NFL has been asking itself for a long time and started answering this year. And that was, is it Brady or is it Belichick? Now, we're not going to have a full answer, obviously, because who's to say that Belichick is not who he was now without Tom Brady? This is just 1 year. But for Tom Brady to win a Super Bowl, no matter who it is, without the New England Patriots organization, without Bill Belichick, is going to be a signal to the entire world that Tom Brady's just on another planet. He was always a part of it. He was never just a system quarterback. And, even if he doesn't win on Sunday, to me, that's the most important storyline.
Yeah, I mean, just sticking with that, I really don't like the argument between Brady and Mahomes, like saying who has more to prove and who has more pressure on them and all that stuff, because I think that there's a lot to be said about both of these guys' careers. I mean, we're looking at Tom Brady here, 6 Super Bowls, just being there at his age without Bill Belichick, I think says a whole lot about him, and we can talk about the Bucs, and they're a great team, and he's got a really good offense around him, but he's still the quarterback of this team, and getting them to the Super Bowl, it's very impressive at his age. And then you look at Mahomes, I mean, back-to-back years in the Super Bowl at his age, which is the opposite side of the spectrum here, is also really impressive. So I don't like how it's about which quarterback, has more pressure, which quarterback needs to prove themselves, because I think they both proved quite a lot while being here. And I think it's a really cool matchup between Brady and Mahomes. It's really the end of an era and the start of another one here. Brady's going to have, even after this season, let's say he loses this game, he's still going to have another couple years in Tampa Bay, and that's what he said. And Mahomes has his whole career ahead of him, really, to continue to prove himself as one of the best. And I just want to say, I think it's really interesting how in the NFC this season, over the course of the playoffs, we've seen the older generation. We've seen Brady and Rodgers. We've seen Brady and Breeze. In the AFC, we've seen more of the newer generation of quarterbacks with Mahomes, Josh Allen, Mahomes and Baker Mayfield. Now it's all culminating to the old versus the new in the Super Bowl here. And that's just really exciting as a fan to be able to see 2 great quarterbacks on the same field, something I think in a number of years, when we're looking back on Mahomes' career, we're going to be talking about a game like this where he went up against Tom Brady, who's obviously one of the greatest of all time. So I think this matchup is just extremely exciting.
Yeah, Dylan, I'm going to take what you said a minute ago with the Belichick-Brady conversation. Belichick, that's a topic for another time. I want to stick with Brady, right? And to me, Brady's the undisputed GOAT. He's playing in his 10th Super Bowl now with the chance to go for number 7. And for me, this game is bigger than the Bucs. This is bigger than the Chiefs. This is Brady and Mahomes, and this can either be, a passing of torch. This could be Brady kind of just celebrating, doing a victory lap. It's just, I feel like Mahomes is the greatest threat to Brady's legacy that we've seen out of a quarterback. Guys like Rodgers have tried to do that, but unfortunately, one is not going to do it when you've got Tom Brady's Thanos number of rings. It's just not going to get the job done. But if you're 25 years old with a chance to get your second ring, 6 is doable, which is crazy to even, comprehend, but it's doable for a guy like Mahomes.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're totally right in that. Mahomes is certainly the biggest threat that Brady could have. But looking outside of that matchup here for a little bit, I just want to bring up just the Chiefs' offense. I can't not talk about them as a whole, and not just Mahomes, but also outside of him, because of just how strong they are and how good they are. I think the Bucs really have a lot on their hands defensively in this one. They did look good a couple weeks ago in the play. They looked good throughout the playoffs, between stopping Drew Brees at least somewhat, stopping Aaron Rodgers at least somewhat. But now they have a whole nother test, because not only do they have to stop Patrick Mahomes, but they also have to stop Tyreek Hill, who's the fastest guy on the planet, it seems like, and the fastest guy in the football field for sure. They have to stop Travis Kelce, who is someone that I think you're going to have trouble guarding one-on-one, whether that be with the secondary or with the linebackers. Either way, it's very tough, very difficult to guard him. And then you add in ability of Patrick Mahomes, not only to throw the ball down the field, but also take off and run, which he's been doing more now. And with his foot basically 100%, that's what he's going to be doing as well, a lot more in this one. The Bucs, all they can hope to do defensively is just try and slow down this offense, maybe get physical with them, especially with a guy like Tyreek Hill. But according to Patrick Mahomes from earlier today, the Chiefs are just about even ready for this, it seems like.
I think that's
but you know what I find interesting?
Our team, maybe we might not have been able to handle that with our team maybe in 2018, but we've been through those adversity and we've been through those battles. And if you watch our team, it's not just a fast flying show. We have a lot of physical guys on this team as well, and so we're ready for every single type of game that can be. If it's a physical game, we're ready for that. If it's a fast paced game, we're ready for that. So we'll be ready to go. The guys are ready to play.
Yes, so certainly, as Mahomes said, this Bucs defense is going to have their hands full, as what it seems like here against this high-flying Kansas City Chiefs offense.
Well, you know what I find interesting is that I think if there's any team that is prepared to at least slow down this Chiefs offense, I think it's the Bucs. This was a very, they had a lot of publicity on them this year just for the fact that their quarterback was a certain guy named Tom Brady. But also, they play in a very difficult division. They had to play the Saints twice in the regular season. It was a rough division. They had a rough playoff schedule, had to play Green Bay. So I think if there's any team that is prepared to take on a multi-dimensional offense that is what you might call a three-headed monster in the Kansas City offense in general, if you're talking about Pat Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. If there's any team that's ready to do it, I think it's Tampa Bay.
Sam, I also just need to push back a little bit on your Tyreek Hill, fastest guy. Did you see the Scotty Miller Twitter beef?
I did not.
Well, Scotty Miller is claiming that he's the fastest receiver in the league. So, maybe that's another matchup that
for some reason I do not believe him. For some
I
reason,
don't know, man. Scotty's good. You got to watch out for Scotty.
No, he did. He had a huge catch against the Packers, but Tyreek Hill, man, watching him run around the field, especially last week against the Bills, that was just impressive. I remember one of his catches. I think it was just a simple little slant route. He probably caught the ball maybe 8 yards down the field, and it ended up being just 70, 80 yards. And that was mostly him just running around the field. So that element of the Chiefs matchup, I think, like you said, Dylan, that's a three-headed monster. It's going to certainly be tough for this Bucs defense.
But I think if any team has a shot at doing it, it's the Bucs. And it's Dylan. You mentioned this is the Brady show. This is Mike Evans. You've got Antonio Brown in the picture, Chris Godwin, but ultimately this team's identity was in their defense. And what better platform to do it in the big game? This is where they're going to show what they're really made of.
You know what I find is that a lot of teams that are good are just not prepared for the publicity that surrounds the Super Bowl, because they're covered in their conference championship games, they're covered in the playoffs, they're covered in the regular season, but the Super Bowl is tenfold that. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of teams that are not ready to be under that kind of publicity. But it's almost like this season has also been training for this entire Bucs team, in the fact that this is the most publicity the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have received probably in any of our lifetimes, right? So that's almost as if another way they have prepared for the magnitude of the 60 minutes of football they're about to play on Sunday. So, my expectations for the Bucs for this weekend are very high.
See, that's interesting to hear from you guys, because, honestly, I go into this game from a fan perspective. I give the benefit of the doubt to the Kansas City Chiefs just because of how good that offense is, and their defense also tends to just step up when big games and big drives and throughout the year, especially the last couple of years, and especially in the playoffs, that defense seems to just step up. But you guys offer up really good points here, especially, offensively. the question with the Bucks isn't about the weapons that they have, because they certainly have plenty of them. I mean, Brady's got Chris Godwin and Mike Evans to throw the ball to, two really good receivers. And then he's got Leonard Fournette. He's got Ronald Jones to hand the ball off to. So that's four guys right there. We're talking about a Chiefs three-headed monster. I mean, I just listed four guys right there that are very good players. So the Bucks, from their perspective, certainly have some really good weapons. That's not the problem. That's never the concern. I think the big thing for the Bucks, consistency and just limiting mistakes, limiting turnovers, because Brady did throw 3 interceptions last week, which was obviously a little bit overlooked because they obviously won the game. And obviously we're talking about Brady at his age going for the 7th ring, but he's got to play a little bit better. He's got to limit those turnovers still. And in addition to that, I think it's just consistency for 4 quarters. I don't think this Bucks offense has played 4 consistent quarters of football good offensively, consistently good. I think even in the Packers game, even in the Saints game before that, there were times a little bit of dips offensively. And you can't have that. You can't have those lulls against Kansas City, because that offense is just going to keep scoring. And it's a lot to ask of the Bucks defensively to stop the Chiefs offensively more than a couple times. I think if you're the Bucks offense, you need consistent 4 quarters, and you also need to limit those turnovers. That's the big thing. If they can do that, I hate to sound, this might sound crazy, but you got to give them a chance at least to win this game against the Chiefs.
Well, you know what I think is an important part of this is usually what I like to do is put each team up against its own games and try and decide, okay, then who has the advantage here. So you think Kansas City, an offensively dominant team, always are. So maybe they have a slight advantage there, but the Bucks offense, I'm not gonna bet against any offense as Tom Brady and just that alone. But I'm a big Mike Evans fan. So I think if the Bucks can stay consistent, like you're talking about, Sam, then they're just about there as well. So then you look defensively, the Bucks were perhaps the best defensive team in football this year. So that gives them a little bit of an advantage also. But another thing that I think is worth mentioning is, for whatever reason, the Super Bowl is the hardest of the pro sports championships here in North America to win back-to-back. Who's to say why that is? Perhaps the Chiefs are the best prepared team to do that in a while, but they're up against the master of it in Tom Brady. That guy is in the Super Bowl as more often than LeBron is in the finals. So, like I've been saying, my expectations for the Bucks are higher than perhaps the predictions of the Chiefs are giving them credit for.
I agree. You mentioned back-to-backs. Brady's done it twice. It's very difficult. People have been saying this for 20 years. It's very difficult to bet against Tom Brady, and now we've got the same situation. It's very difficult to bet against Patrick Mahomes. So it's an unstoppable force meets an immovable object, whichever of the two. It's going to be probably the most exciting Super Bowl we've seen in quite some time.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I think it's tough to pick against either of these teams just because of everything they bring to the table here. And in me thinking about this game, it's the hardest to pick against Tom Brady just because of, his track record and everything he has going for him, and all those Super Bowl rings like we talked about. But I just think in terms of the Bucks, they need too much has to go right for them to win. And I look at the Chiefs in a lot more optimistic tone because I've just seen them offensively produce at unbelievable levels. I think that's going to be really tough for this Bucks defense to stop. And offensively, the Bucks have struggled a little bit at times, and I think that's going to be maybe their downfall here in this one. So I think the Chiefs are going to find a way to come up and win this game, especially defensively. They seem to come up in big moments and win football games when they matter most, and this offense is just going to keep producing like they have all season.
So are we doing predictions now?
Yeah, I mean,
probably should. We've just about, but let's do officially.
I just basically tipped my hand, so I guess I'll give you a score too. Why not?
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you a score. I got 34-24. I'm going to take the Chiefs in this one.
Okay, I'm going to go with the Bucks 34-31. That's my prediction.
Oh, come on, man. You took the words right out of my mouth. How about 35-32? Just keep it with
Okay, whatever.
It's
Whatever. Okay.
27-24. I think it's going to be close. And I'm going to bet on the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs, they're the reigning champs. I think it's their game to lose, but deep down, I just Brady.
Can't pick against him.
It's Tom Brady.
Can't pick against him.
Yeah.
That's totally fair.
Jack, remind us, where are you from?
I'm from the city of Boston. I'm
okay.
That is a slight bias, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I see.
Maybe. Anyways, before we go to break, just very quickly here, we just wanted to add this in. We've been talking about it earlier in the show. Huge news. We talked about, something important, the Super Bowl. But we have big football news, and that's the NCAA football game is coming back after a good amount of years away. Since 2014 was the last edition. It's coming back. Jack, I just want to get your point quickly. Are you as excited about this game as I am?
I could not be more excited.
Oh, you brought it.
More. And you know what? It's not NCAA football anymore. They scrapped the title. It's EA Sports College Football. They dropped the NCAA. And I'm excited because I don't want anything to do with NCAA. They're toast. I'm so excited for this game. And there's a lot of logistical things that needs to happen for this to be as exciting as we want it to be. But just the fact that they've announced that they're bringing it back is a huge win in my book.
I'm totally with you on this one, Jack. And I also think, like you were kind of alluding to there, the fact that we might not get to see actual NCAA players because it's against NCAA regulations for them to use their name and likeness in a video game is the most bonkers and absurd thing I've ever heard in my life. That like, if I showed up in a video game, there's no rule saying Fordham can keep me from being in the video game. It's just why? Because they're an athlete, because they're making money for the school. Completely ridiculous. But either way, I'm very excited for this game. I don't play a lot of video games, but I do love a nice college football game, so I'm excited.
Yeah, I mean, this was just a game of our childhoods, a game of lots of people's childhoods all over the country, sports fans. So we're all really excited for it. We're going to take a short break here on One Nightly. Sam Davis, Dylan Balsamo, Jack Roach is going to be back to discuss some MLB storylines, including the negotiations surrounding the 2021 season and the news on former Mets manager Mickey Callaway. All of that and more after the break. Stick with us. Welcome back to One Nightly this fine Wednesday evening. Thank you for watching wherever that may be on YouTube or Twitter. I'm Sam Davis, back with Dylan Balsamo and Jack Roach. We've got some MLB talk here. This past Friday, the MLB proposed a plan for a 154-game season that would pay the players their full 162-game salary, which is very important. But it would push back spring training arrival to March 22nd, and it pushed back first games to April 28th, excuse me. The plan also included expanded playoffs and the universal DH. By Monday, so just a few short days later, the Major League Baseball Players Association already declined the offer, saying that Commissioner Rob Manfred had too much power over canceling games due to COVID, despite the fact that the league gave the players probably what they wanted the most, which was 162 games salary, despite not playing that full year. Because of the decline, the season's still scheduled to begin with spring training February 17th. And an opening day on April 1st. So there's two sides to this. I'll start with you, Jack, here. Do you like this proposal from the league and their standpoint, or are you siding with the players who declined this proposal?
I'm a guy that almost always sides with the players, and I don't think I'm ready to make an exception here, but man, when I hear this proposal, I just hate the fact that we do not have a definite universal DH. It is just beyond me. No one wants to see pitchers hit. I love baseball so much, and I sympathize with fans that appreciate the strategy of pitchers and defensive substitutions, but let's just get the universal DH. It'll make the game so much more exciting, and a game that desperately needs young fans, that needs the attention of the media. And while there may have been other language around it that wasn't necessarily a hit for the players, it pains me as a fan to not have that guarantee.
And I was ready to talk about the negotiation of the amount of games, but while we're talking about the DH, I might as well mention I was against the designated hitter for a long time. I didn't want it in the American League either. I was a big fan of. I love the strategy. I love defensive double switches.
Sure.
I love pinch hitters. Seeing Bartolo Colon hit a home run a few years ago was an incredible moment I'll tell my children about. But I do understand that the use of a universal DH is incredibly important for the expansion of the game and getting people back interested in baseball again. And I'll tell you, just watching the first game this season with universal DH, Giancarlo Stanton hitting a home run in Nationals Park when he wouldn't have even played in the game had it not been for the universal DH, kind of set it in my mind that was like, oh, I get it. I understand it. I'm with it. But in terms of the actual the full deal that the Players Association declined, I found it odd at first. I was like, why would they decline this? This seems like a pretty sweet deal for them. But I guess at the end of the day, I'm hopeful that what they wanted was, we want to play a full season, no matter what we're getting paid. And to be honest, I took that as a great sign of encouragement of like, wow, the players want to play a full 162 game season. And it excited me. It got me much more excited for this season, no matter when an agreement is made.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to talk, obviously I'll touch on the DH as well now that you guys brought it up, and then also the expanded playoffs too, which is another part of this as well. The DH I do like too. I think watching pitchers hit is not fun for anyone. And although we do get great moments like Bartolo Colon, we also get pretty bad moments just about every game when they strike out and certainly never get a hit. So that's something that I think definitely benefits the game as a whole. There is still a little bit of strategy that can be used, obviously, certainly not as much. But that strategy, I think, still comes out in big playoff games. You'll see defensive switches and you'll see all that kind of stuff. So I do like the universal DH. The expanded playoffs, I was a little shaky on at first, just because I felt like teams that, especially in a whole 162 game season, teams like the Dodgers from 2020, if they were to play a full year, really just dominated and probably would have won the division by quite a lot of games, even in a pretty good division. And the fact that they still have to play a 3-game series come playoff time, I didn't like that. I felt like it wasn't fair to them, just putting them in that situation where it makes almost the season kind of useless, because then you still have to play a 3-game set just like every other team. So if they do the expanded playoffs, I think it's really important that they set up some sort of bye for that first place team, for that best record, kind of like what the NFL did. They did the expanded playoffs and they did that first round bye. I think that worked pretty well for them. The expanded playoffs as a whole, I think, are pretty exciting. I really enjoyed watching Wild Card Weekend, which was obviously expanded in advance this season. I really enjoyed watching that as a baseball fan. So I think that's a good thing. But I think it's important to just kind of reward these really good teams, these number one seeds that certainly play through a long, long season of 162 games and deserve to not play in that short little 3-game series and risk getting bounced early from the playoffs after spending a whole year basically on top.
Do you guys remember those Pirates teams that would win like 100+ games and then subsequently lose the wild card game? And it's like, well, we just won 100 games and it happened back-to-back years. And you just feel so bad for them, and I feel like we're at a point now where the MLB has already kind of got their foot in the door with the expanded playoffs. And it's really tough to just walk away from that now that they have that power. And it's really tough to adequately create a playoff format that works for every team when any bad team can beat any good team any given baseball. That's what I love about baseball, because you see teams like the Detroit Tigers beating the Dodgers. You don't see that so often in football and even basketball, but that can happen in any baseball game.
And, much like the DH, actually, I was a little against any kind of expanded playoffs at first. I had liked the 10-team format. And then when they were talking about expanding it full time, I was like, "What? Are we just gonna have the whole league play in the playoffs? What's the point of a regular season in the first place?" But Wild Card Weekend in baseball this past season, much like the DH this past season, kind of just altered my perspective on this. Anything that can bring that extra entertainment factor to the game. Purists won't like to hear it, including my former self. But it's great for the game. It's still baseball. I think the argument for a lot of purists they won't like watching a 100-win team lose the first round of the playoffs, but it's still baseball. You're still playing 9 innings, even if it's best of 3 series against a 20-win team. It's still baseball. You still have to play a baseball game, and you have to win a baseball game. So that is my new thinking about it. So whatever the new playoff format is, I'm for it.
Yeah, Jack, I think you brought up a good point. Once MLB gets their foot in the door here and starts like testing the waters and doing this expanded playoffs, I think deep down a lot of fans were thinking this is not just a one-year thing. This is something that they're obviously very forward in thinking about, and they really like it. So that's why they tried it out in the 60-game season, and that's why they want to bring it back here. So it makes a lot of sense. And now that because I was against the playoffs too, the expanded playoffs, but now that I've seen it, I want it again as a fan. So I think that's what they kind of expected, and that's what they thought would happen, which seems to be the case in general among MLB fans. Obviously, the players are in a much different situation here. Unfortunately, I think with the players and the Players Association in this discussion and these negotiations, it just comes down to kind of mistrust, and that's just the bottom line. Like, no one seems to really trust each other. The Players Association just seems to be finding whatever little thing might be wrong with this proposal that they can and say, this is how they're using this plan to get back at us or do what they can to make more money or whatever it may be. And sure, that might be the case, but if you look at the plan as a whole, you're playing less games, you're getting paid to play 162. That seems like a pretty good deal. The universal DH, if you're a really good hitter and struggle in the field, that's an awesome thing, because now as a free agent, I can sign in the National League, and that benefits me as well. You look at a guy like Nelson Cruz, he just re-signed with the Twins, and I think that deal happened mostly because this universal DH was not approved, and he could have went somewhere else, maybe even for more money if the universal DH was approved. So my whole point is that from the player's standpoint, I just find, I normally like to side with them, but I find trouble seeing the logic in this. I think they're just kind of nitpicking this plan and looking for whatever ways they can say, well, I don't trust Rob Manfred doing this, and I don't trust the owners because they're just out for money. I don't know. For me, that's just how I look at the mindset of the players in this situation, which I think is a really bad thing because overall the plan is after safety. It's after player safety. I think pushing back the seasons, especially spring training sites like Arizona and Florida, it'll help. Maybe their COVID cases will go down as the weather gets warmer, as we get more into the summer here. So that's something to think about. And I think the bottom line with this plan is you're getting paid for 162. And it's just the biggest thing is the health and safety of the players, and pushing the season back at least a little bit, I got to think is going to help with that at least a little.
Yeah. And if anything, this, negotiation process just shows how fractured the relationship is between the league and the Players Association. And it just makes me sad at a time where the game desperately needs unity to become a household sport. It needs to be more than just America's pastime. I want to watch games on ESPN on Friday nights and be excited about that.
Baseball's got a lot of problems right now, and they really can't afford to have any of them. Some of them are more socially influenced, if you catch my drift. But this is one that can be solved really quickly. I think for the good of the game, the Major League Baseball is going to have to listen to the players more, and the players are going to have to shrug a little bit and listen to the owners more. It is the only way that the sport will continue to survive in the way that we know it, that we were raised on it, that our parents were raised on it, that we would like to raise our children on, I'm sure. So that is the least baseball can do to put themselves back in the national spotlight that football always had with them, that I think basketball has really taken from them, especially in the last 2 decades. So for me, that's the most important thing baseball can do, not just in general, but really right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it, Dylan. Baseball has a lot of problems, and it's not just with this, because obviously we have the situation with Mickey Callaway, which we'll get to here briefly, who has been suspended as the Angels pitching coach. There's an active investigation going on there with inappropriate behavior between him and 5 women during his time with the Cleveland Indians and with the New York Mets. So another incident here kind of tied to the New York Mets after obviously Jared Porter was fired there for his as a GM for his involvement in a harassment situation there. So Dylan, as a Mets fan here, a great offseason on the baseball field, but certainly some trouble off of it heading into the 2021 season here.
Certainly. And, at least with Jared Porter, not that it makes anything any better, but the report was the first the public learned of the situation. With Mickey Callaway, what makes that whole situation really so disgusting is that maybe not everybody knew that everybody knew, but there was knowledge of it in the baseball community, and it was never addressed. And that kind of thing is truly inexcusable. And, a big thing is, and I was actually really upset with a lot of people talking about this on Twitter almost as soon as the Mickey Callaway thing happened, was talking about what does this do for the Trevor Bauer situation. I already kind of had my issues with Trevor Bauer, and I know a lot of Mets fans agree with me about him coming to the Mets in an environment right now where perhaps his kind of personality isn't the right fit for the team and the kind of environment they want to create. So there's just a changing of the guard in ownership has proven that has not solved the problems that continue to surround the New York Metropolitans.
Yeah, it's definitely, I initially was like, well, this could potentially open the door for, a Trevor Bauer to the Angels situation with the Mickey Callaway news. But it's really hard to just pretend that that's the main story, that that's the most important thing here, because in the span of 2 weeks, we're having these major stories coming out, about women being treated unfairly, inappropriately in this game. And it's not even the only problem. I mean, there's abuse in the game of baseball. There's, a lack of diversity in the game of baseball. And these are all things that desperately need to be addressed.
If I could say one more quick thing, Sam.
Mhm.
While Mickey Callaway was still the manager of the Mets, I had covered a Mets game for FUV, and went to a press conference, post-game press conference after the game, and he was taking questions, and he did not give off any kind of creepy or predatory vibe in the situation. He just seemed like some guy, and the reason I'm saying that is, the situations that make women feel in danger in the sports world, they can be addressed in some ways with getting people who are very clearly of that nature at a situation, but it's a lot more difficult than that because some people hide it better, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredibly difficult situation, and it isn't just the Mets, too. This is an entire baseball situation. This is an entire baseball problem that we've seen now, because it's not just the Mets organization, it's other organizations as well being connected with these guys. And we have to assume more instances, not only in the past, but happening in the future as well. So that's something that certainly needs to be addressed here for Major League Baseball, and it's something that they definitely need to work on. One of many problems that they have, but this is probably the biggest one and probably the most important one for them going forward. That'll wrap up our baseball talk. That'll do it for that. Me and Dylan next, we'll get into some local hockey here. We got the Rangers and the Devils. You're watching One on One Nightly. We'll be back after this short break. Here on One on One Nightly, live on YouTube and Twitter. I'm Sam Davis, along with Dylan Balsamo. Jack Roach will be back for our final segment. Alex Wells is doing a great job with the production. We're going to shift our talks here to a little bit of hockey. And after the loss in overtime to the Penguins this past weekend, New York Rangers defenseman Tony DeAngelo had an altercation with goaltender Alexander Georgiev, which resulted in him being placed on waivers, clearing those waivers, and now the Rangers are looking to trade him to another team. So that should happen very soon. It has been made known by GM Jeff Gorton that DeAngelo has played his last game as a Ranger. The incident actually is not alone. There are rumors of questionable treatment of rookie defenseman Condre Miller, who's an African-American. He also has past suspensions due to sexist, homophobic, or racist language on 2 occasions in the OHL. Definitely not the best guy to have in this young Rangers locker room, and they did what they had to do to get rid of him.
Yes, I can say for the Rangers' sake, I'm happy that it's early enough in the season that like this was clearly an issue that was surrounding the team, and it's something we didn't even realize how dire it was until stuff really hit the fan against the Penguins. So I'm glad that I'll say cancerous part of the team and the team's morale and how the team is functioned is being rid of now. Um, you know, hockey is such a team-oriented sport. You can't have a link in the chain that's going to bring down the other links. So it was very important that that D'Angelo was taken out of the situation. And if he does not understand the magnitude of the things that he has done and the implications of the things he has said, then I hope he never plays another game in the National Hockey League. He has done the kind of things, has said the kind of things, has acted in ways from what we've heard that there is no place for in this sport, even what one might call the most fight centric of sports. It is beyond any team to even go there, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot to be said about the fact that D'Angelo had a 2-year contract extension this past October worth $9 million, $9.6 million. And the fact that the Rangers were willing to just give up on this contract and give up on him as a player, I think says a lot about, not only his character on the negative side, but also how the Rangers really wanted to get past this situation. They really wanted to build a better culture, especially with the young team. They're kind of rebuilding. They've certainly had a difficult year. And stuff like this doesn't help, we see this all the time. And especially it seems to be these altercations happen quite more often with teams that are struggling and going through difficulties. And that's when players point fingers and blame other people. And this isn't just this is more than one incident, obviously. So it gave the Rangers plenty of reason to let go of D'Angelo, which was certainly the right decision for them. And it was definitely the last straw, I think, that the GM Gorton saw for the Rangers situation. Over in the Devils here, we have a little bit of a COVID situation going on in the NHL. We talked about earlier how the NHL has handled COVID, and they've done certainly what seems like the best they can, but it's unavoidable, as we've seen. I mean, there's next 3 games for the Devils are postponed until at least Saturday, the 6th of February. And 10 players are currently on the COVID-19 list. That's 14 postponed games since the NHL season has started on January 13th. The earliest the Devils can play will be Tuesday, February 9th against the Penguins. So a little bit over a week here. Let me ask you this, Dylan. Is this a serious issue for the NHL, or is this just like kind of another initial roadblock that we've seen other leagues and other teams go through here to start the season?
Well, I will say this about the Devils. From what we have heard, from what we know, it's not like they were going out and breaking COVID protocol. Sometimes it seems you're just going to get it, unfortunately. And, when one Devil gets it, all the Devils are going to get it, of course. But in terms of the NHL in general, I think, we mentioned this earlier in the show. I really think they did the best job of any of the big 4 sports in transitioning to a COVID bubble to finish out their already started season last year. But here, adjustments are going to need to be made. And I think the NHL, in most situations, in terms of gameplay, is very good at putting their ego aside, unlike, say, the NFL, and saying some games just are not going to be played. It's just how it's going to be. So, I'm happy that the NHL is more like that. And, you feel bad for the Devils because they're playing above expectations, above what expectations were for them this season. So you feel sorry for them, but also there's nothing else that can be done. But the NHL, I think, is going to go about this correctly.
Yeah, and I mean, like you just said, you love what the Devils have done this season just because their expectations weren't very high and they seem to be overachieving, which you always like to see, especially with a team that you expect very little of, and then they seem to play very well and play very well together. So it's tough for them to have to go through this, but unfortunately, that's just the reality of the situation we're in. And the NHL, I think you can't fault them because they've done everything they could, and this is just a very strong difference between what we talked about in the NFL and the lack of things that they've done. So, when these things happened, you were like, well, maybe they can do more here. With the NHL, they've done exactly what they can. They've rearranged the divisions, which is huge. I think limiting travel, playing longer series of games instead of just playing one game on the road and traveling more often. So they've done what they could. And I think looking at other leagues who have faced similar issues to start the season, with lots of players getting COVID or some teams being sidelined for a good amount of time, things seem to even themselves out. Things seem to progress as the season goes on, which I expect the NHL to follow suit, just like the other pro leagues have done. And they've done certainly just a fine job finishing. So I don't doubt that the NHL will be able to have a season, will be able to finish. It's just, like you said, it's kind of unfortunate here for the Devils, who obviously have had a pretty good start. Good stuff, Dylan. We're going to shift over here from the NHL, and we're going to bring back Jack Roach for our final segment of tonight's show. It's going to be buy or sell on the NBA, looking at the standings early on here in the season. We're going to take a short break for now, though. Stay tuned to One on One Nightly. Welcome back to One on One Nightly. It's 10:41. It is our last segment here of the show. I'm Sam Davis. Dylan Balsamo's with me. Jack Roach also here. Alex Wool's doing the producing. We are taking a look at some very early, we say very early, NBA standings here in the Eastern and Western conferences. The game's pretty simple. It's buying or selling these teams, given the position that they are in at the moment. So checking the current standings. We're going to begin with the Brooklyn Nets here. They sit at second in the Eastern Conference right now. They have a record of 14-9. Jack, are you going to buy or sell the Brooklyn Nets here at the number 2 position in the East?
Listen, you might not like this take, but you just can't give them a grade right now. You got to give them a TBD right now because they're 14-9, second place in the East. There are games when they seem unbeatable. We saw them last night go up against one of the best in the West, and they played great. And then there are games when they give up 149 points to the 4-12 Washington Wizards. They're 5-3 since they picked up Harden, and they have a lot to figure out. The team that we see now, I think, is going to be a lot different than the team we see at the end of the season. I just think it's too early to give them a proper grade.
Well, I think that's just called Jack being a chicken is what I think that actually is. But you know what? I'm totally buying the Nets. I think, we talk a lot about the LA Rams earlier in the show, and we mentioned the Nets when we were talking about them. But, when the Nets did jump through 8,000 hoops to get James Harden, what they really did was narrow their window for winning the NBA championship to this year, if not next. So, I think that sense of immediacy is very evident on the court. They're 5-3 since Harden has come to Brooklyn, and that will continue to improve as the team remelds itself with this new addition. But to me, that sense of immediacy of like, oh, the franchise is not buying in on us winning in the next 5 years. They're buying in on us winning right now. And to me, you can really feel that in the court. I'm totally buying the Nets. I think they're going to make a run for the Eastern Conference spot in the NBA Finals.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dylan. I'm also going to buy the Nets here at the number 2 position. I think I'm a little skeptical, I must say, about the Nets, especially defensively. Since trading for James Harden, which was gaining a poor defender, and they also gave away one of their best defenders in Jared Allen. Their numbers for offensive rating would be the best of all time, and their numbers for defensive rating would be the worst of all time. So I think that says a lot. That's a serious worry. For the regular season, I'm not as worried because I think their offensive firepower and just how good of a team they are, and that big three is going to get them to win a lot of games. It's going to set them up for obviously making the playoffs is no doubt, but also set them up, I think, in a pretty good position to make a run at an Eastern Conference Finals. But once you get to the playoffs, I worry a little bit about the defense. They certainly need to step up and play better. You can't have the worst defense of all time and win an NBA Finals. I'm sorry, it's not possible, no matter how good that offense is. So I think I'm going to buy the Nets right now, but I'm a little cautious just because of that defense. I think they certainly need to improve going into the playoffs, and they got to do it now as we get closer there. So going from the Nets, sticking in the Eastern Conference, though, who's the second place team, we're going to jump to the first place team in the Eastern Conference, and that's the Philadelphia 76ers. Dylan, are you going to buy the Philadelphia 76ers as the best team in the East right now?
Well, let me preface this by saying so much credit is due to Philadelphia 76ers fans because next to Chicago Cubs fans and Cleveland Indians fans, they are perhaps the most patient fans in sports. We've been hearing the phrase "trust the process" for how long, and they trusted the process. I'm going to give them that. The 76ers are good right now, and I think they're going to stay good. Maybe not this good, but they're going to stay good, I think. There's too much talent on this team. Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris, whoever you want to say. They're too good to not stay good. I don't think they're going to stay up on the plateau they have reached right now in the Eastern Conference because we're like 3 games in or something. I don't know. So I think they will continue to find success. Maybe this isn't the year they go to the Eastern Conference Finals, but they're getting there.
I think that they're probably the most well-rounded team in the East. There's a reason why they're 15-6 right now. And that team is really clicking. Ben Simmons is not putting up gaudy numbers, but he's just a winning player. And Joel Embiid's finally having his MVP type season. And I think the changes they made in the offseason, bringing in Doc Rivers and really getting role players that match with their stars, like Al Horford, as much as I love him, was a horrible fit with the 76ers. And I think that they've got some good rotational pieces that really mesh well with their stars. And I am definitely on the buy team. No more TBD, no fake grades. I am buying the Philadelphia 76ers.
I'm with you guys too. I'm buying this 76ers as well. I think it's interesting when you compare them to the Nets here, who we just talked about, obviously right behind them, and will probably be neck and neck, I think, for this Eastern Conference throughout the year. The Nets have Steve Nash, who, as a head coach, who's had a little bit of a struggle controlling his guys, especially Kyrie Irving. Doc Rivers is about as solid of a coach as you can get. He seems to be a great fit for the 76ers. And then you look at the kind of the supporting cast, I mean, surrounding the 76ers that are playing like much more than that. Meanwhile, the Nets, outside of their big three, there's not really a whole lot there. So I think the 76ers are just consistently and thoroughly more of a good team. And if Embiid continues to play the way he's playing right now as an MVP candidate, I'd watch out for the 76ers. I'm definitely buying them for now, but I do recognize the fact that this Nets team is the most talented in the Eastern Conference. If they can figure things out defensively, I have to take the Nets over whoever they play in that Eastern Conference. So, but for now, I'm totally buying the 76ers just like you guys. Now we're going to talk about the Celtics. Sit at fourth place, a somewhat unimpressive 11-8 to start the year. But, I mean, they have played games without Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Kemba Walker. All three of them are back right now. So, Jack, I'm going to start with you. Are you going to buy or sell the Celtics as fourth here in the Eastern Conference?
You know what? I'm breaking the mold again. I'm giving not a buy, not a sell. We've heard a lot about GameStop. We've heard a lot about AMC recently. And I think something that, the third option that we're overlooking is hold. And I'm holding the Celtics if you have stock in the Celtics right now. Marcus Smart going down with that grade 1 calf. I'm going to cover your face with my hand. Because
what kind of ridiculous take is that?
Hear me out. We have not seen this Celtics team at their full strength. Kemba Walker just returning to the team. Jason Tatum got COVID, and now the heart and soul of the team, Marcus Smart, goes down. Thank God he didn't tear his Achilles. Fans were suspecting that, but I just can't give them their proper grade without seeing the whole team together. And my guy, Jaylen Brown's balling out. He's having an all NBA season, averaging 27 points a game and really willing this team to their fourth place standing in the East right now. But it's just not fair to the rest of the team to assess them without all their guys together. Come on.
This is a very simple game. There are two options. You can either buy or you can sell. It's that easy.
No. It's never that easy.
Okay. Ready for this? All right. So I even think their 11-8 record and fourth place, even that is kind of deceiving to me, because I don't care who hasn't been in the lineup. They're 17th in points per game, 13th in rebounds per game, 8th in opponents' points per game. It's just too not good for me to not sell. You get what I'm saying? I'm sorry. I know they've been missing guys, but if you can't buy, you got to sell. That's how the game works, Jack.
Not if you have shares.
Who said anything about shares? What are you playing, Monopoly? What is this?
I'm a Celtics fan, man. I'm repping my squad.
I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna go ahead and interrupt here. I'm gonna also play by the rules of the game. I'm gonna buy the Celtics. I think they're better than that fourth place spot. I think they're a better team than their record indicates right now. Kemba Walker, Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown together on the court, all healthy, is a really solid big three. And we're talking about big threes in the Eastern Conference. Maybe they're not at the Nets level, but I think they're close to it. They're a very good big three there. I see the Celtics more as like the third place team in the East, or maybe even higher this season. I think they're going to be able to turn it around here. So I'm going to buy them. I think they're better than what their record and what their standing currently indicates. Obviously, it's early in the year with that. Shifting over to the Western Conference here, we have the Utah Jazz, who have been red hot. They've won 12 of 13 games. They sit atop the Western Conference, 16-5. Dylan, are you going to buy the Jazz, not the Jazz, as the best
never
team
buy the Jets. You
in the
never
West?
buy the Jets.
Yeah, the answer is no. I would not buy the Jets. But the Jazz, you know what? Yeah, I'm buying them. And let me tell you why. They lead the NBA in rebounds per game. Rebounds, I think, are so important to me. When you are getting the ball, no matter how it is, the points will come. If they continue to be as aggressive as a team that leads the league in rebounds can be, you're going to get the ball, and eventually you will score. I don't think they're the best team in the West. I don't think that by any stretch of the imagination. but they are good enough to continue to be near the top of the West. And if they continue to be that type of team that's aggressive and just has so much talent on the court that they're always going to get the ball, they're going to be fine. Yeah, I'm buying the Jazz.
Dylan, I think you're looking too much into these stats and not looking at the rosters, right? And don't get me wrong, the Jazz are having a great season. They deserve to be the number one team in the West right now, as far as standings come. But I don't need, basketball reference to tell me how many rebounds they average per game. When they go into the playoffs, they just don't have the offensive firepower to compete with either team in LA. And I know we're going to talk about the Nuggets next, but I don't know if I can put them ahead of them either. So, you can throw rebounds, you can throw all these other stats at me, but I'm selling the Jazz as hot as they are right now.
Yeah, I'm with you, Jack. I'm selling them too, which is tough because, you talked about shooting and offensively, shooting the three. Donovan Mitchell, Mike Conley, they're both shooting 40% from three-point range. So they've been unbelievable. And just as a team, they've been shooting the three really well. But I don't expect that to stay throughout the entire season. I think they're going to hit some cold stretches. And when that happens, they're going to lose. And that happened against the Nuggets, which we're going to talk about next year. So I think the Jazz are a great team and will certainly make the playoffs and could be a force to be reckoned with, but they still have to get through those teams in LA, and they still even have to get through the Denver Nuggets in that Western Conference. So I'm going to sell on the Jazz. I think they're a great team, but just certainly not as good as that number one position will be. I don't see that holding out throughout the year. The Jazz obviously lost to the Denver Nuggets on Sunday, like I said. They sit at the 4 position in the Western Conference. They're 12-8. They're 3.5 games back of the Lakers and Clippers. Jack, are you buying or selling with the Nuggets here?
I'm going to give you a proper answer this time. I'm going to sell the Nuggets. And here's why. They got off to a bit of a rocky start, and it's been a funky season, and that's to be expected. Michael Porter Jr. missing time. But Jokic is my MVP, and I think a lot of other people will share that opinion. But when you look at guys like Jamal Murray and you look at Michael Porter Jr., our producer Alex Foles is laughing because I criticize Jamal Murray a lot, but you expect these guys to take the leap, the next step. And I just don't know if we're quite seeing that from some of the young stars on the Jazz outside of Jokic. And unfortunately, one stud player is not going to get the job done in this NBA landscape.
I just want to say one more quick thing about the Jazz. I'm not saying they're the best team in the West. I'm buying that they're going to continue to be a good team. I think they'll be like 4th in the West. But in that same vein, yeah, I'm going to buy the Nuggets too. I think they're another, middle of the playoff contention Western Conference team. I think the Nuggets are going to be fine. They're a great offensive team. Like we talked about, I agree. Jokic is also my MVP. I think the rest of the team is going to meet up with him before the season's over. That's what I think is the important thing here. So, yeah, I'm also going to buy the Nuggets. Fight me.
I'm not going to fight you. I'm buying the Nuggets too. I'm with you. Jack, I understand the criticism of Jamal Murray. I understand the criticism of guys that surrounding Jokic, but I think it's bound to be time for some of these players, especially Jamal Murray, to turn things around and to play a little bit better and play like he did in the playoffs last season. Jokic is going to continue to play extremely well. He's going to continue to build that MVP case. And the supporting cast will certainly get better around him. I think this team is playing will play a lot better than they look right now. I'm very confident in them to do so. And I think where they are right now, I think there's quite a lot of room for improvement. But I think if the team is going to make it, I think it's going to be the Nuggets. They're sort of trending in the right direction here. I think that win against the Jazz on Sunday is kind of a big one. And I think it shows that Jokic is certainly a star in this league and that this team is here to stay. So I'm gonna buy the Nuggets. Finish off the show here. We have the LA Clippers. They're tied for second with the Lakers, 16-6. They're a half game behind the Jazz for first place. They're basically right there for the West. Dylan, do you see the Clippers as the second best team in the Western Conference?
I think the Clippers are going to end up being the best team in the Western Conference. And let me tell you why, because I saw Jack Roche's eyes kind of come open when I said that. But let me tell you why. they're looking to build a great team. They made 2 big acquisitions in 1 year, and then of course everyone's touting on them last season. But here's the thing: with a very small number of exceptions that I can count on maybe 3 fingers, that first year when you make that big transition from a team into a couple big acquisitions and now you're fighting for a title, it never works that first year. Almost never works that first year. The second year is usually when it begins to click. And for the Clippers, that time is right now. So, they had their first big season with Kawhi and Paul George. Didn't work out the way they wanted it to. They made adjustments, and now they come into the season. To me, they are the team to be in the Western Conference. They're my pick to go to the NBA Finals.
You had me until that last part. I was gonna say, wow, Dylan, we actually agree, because I'm absolutely buying the Clippers. And let me just set the record straight with my picks here, okay? In the East, I think there are 4 teams that can come out of that conference. And in the West, I only see 2, and they're both from Los Angeles. It's the Lakers and the Clippers. And right now, the Lakers are the reigning champs. So, I'm going to stick with them for now. But the Clippers are right there, and I really see them as a more complete team, not only from chemistry standards with, Kawhi and Paul George having a second season together now, but just the addition of Serge Ibaka. I think they're a really good team, and I would not be shocked to see them take home a Larry O.B.
I think I'm also going to buy the Clippers, especially when it's the regular season. They've always found success in the regular season. They did last season. So a lot of people were certainly down on the Clippers last year, but I mean, they found a lot of success in the regular season. There's no doubting that. I think they're going to do that as well. The playoffs is a whole nother story that still worries me. Paul George still worries me in the playoffs, just like I'm a little bit worried about the Nets. I think they'll win a lot in the regular season. Come playoff time, it's going to be a little bit different. But right now, in terms of the regular season, I'm totally buying the Clippers. I think they're a very good team, and they'll certainly be up there in the Western Conference to challenge the throne of the Lakers. So that's going to wrap up our show today, I think. We covered all the bases today between the MLB, the NHL, some NBA, and even the NFL and the Super Bowl coming up. For our producer, Alex Wold, Jack Roach on the headlines, my partner, Dylan Balsamo, I'm Sam Davis. One-on-One is a production of WFUV Sports. The director of WFUV Sports is Bobby Schaffardini. Thank you for joining us. It's a school night, so go get some sleep.